So, David, who is Sechweo, and how did he figure? And can we just take the Zulu nation through that next stage and hurtle towards the sort of fall of it, 1877, when Henry Bartle Frere comes in? Can you take us up to that point? There's almost a transition point. We've got the diamonds, we've got the way that Shepstone has played one game, as Saul told us, and then another game. Can you just bridge that gap before we come to the British?
Well, Cetshwayo is, of course, the chief player in the Anglo-Zulu War of 1879. He's born in 1833. He's the eldest son of Mpande, but like his uncle Shaka before him, he's not expected to become the next chief. There's a favoured son who's younger than him, one of his half-brothers, called Mbayazi, who, through the 1850s, he really has to compete with for primacy, this role of heir designate. And he does this in a very similar way to Shaka, actually, in the sense that he uses his military prowess, his early years in a regiment of Mpande's army, to build up his support, both among the regiments, but also among the princes and the great chiefs of the kingdom. Until 1857, he feels strong enough to take on, in battle, his brother and defeats him in 1857. Now, the result of this battle is not to put him, of course, as king because his father is still alive, but effectively it makes him confirms him as the heir, and in the period between 1857 and the death of Mpande in 1872, there is in effect a dual monarchy at which Cetshwayo performs sort of equal power.
Saul Dubois, in 1877, Henry Bartle Frere became Governor of Cape Colony and High Commissioner for South Africa.
Yes.
He became a key player. Can you tell us what he did?
Well, Bartle Frere comes from India. He has a glittering career. He particularly distinguished himself during the Indian Mutiny as one of the few people who did on the British side. He's a man of great cultivation. He's president of the Royal Asiatic Society, Royal Geographical Society, and so forth. And he's brought in because the then colonial secretary of Carnarvon, Twitters as he was called, decides that the whole region of South Africa, and we don't yet have a unitary state, he wants to federate the whole of the Union of South Africa, or federate South Africa. So he persuades Frere, much against Frere's instincts, to come to South Africa, gives him a great deal of money, possibly a peerage, and he says to Frere, if you can bring this confederation about, and this will be the great prize. And they locate the Zulu, the destruction of the Zulu, as being one of the absolutely key points. If you can defeat the Zulu, but also the Xhosa and the Pedi and others, if you can do this, this will break African societies, create a ready source of labour, and be able to move to really pacify the whole region of South Africa and bring it under effective British rule.
So that's very clear. You're saying effectively break the Zulus and you'll get the Confederation. So
now, Frere himself actually is a particularly interesting character because he comes to Cape Town, and there is now a campaign that is going on from Zululand. Shepstone is feeding Carnarvon and Frere with rumours that Cetshwayo wants to take over the whole of South Africa.
The new Zulu chief.
New Zulu chief, which has no basis at all. And Frere is another one of these people who represents something of the dual side of liberalism that one can see in so many people at this time. On the one hand, he has a view which is progressive, which wants to bring African people the benefits of civilization and progress. But on the other hand, there's a hard-edged utilitarian view that he has to crush people, bring them into labour service, and that he knows best.
And he holds a gun to their head, doesn't he?
He holds a gun to their head.
I mean, he gives them a month to sort of change their ways utterly or be invaded.
That's right.
I mean, there's no deal. And so this leads to the Zulu War, an extraordinary event, Saul David, in the sense that on the 22nd of January 1879 there were two battles. Can you briefly tell us about both of them and on the same day? And one was a glorious, majestic, amazing victory for Zulu, and the other was a glorious, majestic, amazing defence for the British.
Yes, extraordinary events. It begins on the 11th of January 1879 with the invasion, and the invasion plan is to send in three columns, one in the north, one in the centre.
The invasion plan of
of the British.
Yeah.
And the central column is commanded by the Commander-in-Chief, Lord Chelmsford, and he takes roughly 5,000 men, and he marches over the course of 10 or 11 days to as far as the craggy mountain of Islamwana. And when he reaches that mountain, he then divides his force again, not once but twice, so that by the morning of the 22nd of January, only 1,700 men are left in the camp, and he's taken the remainder out on effectively a bit of a wild goose chase where he thinks the Zulus are. Where the Zulus actually are is advancing on the camp, and on the morning of the 22nd of January, they attack the camp with 15 to 20,000 warriors, and after a hard fight, during part of which Chelmsford actually receives word that the attack's going on and will he come back and reinforce the camp, and he ignores those orders, thinking it's just alarmism. The camp is completely destroyed, and only a matter of a couple of hundred people actually escape. Now, some of them escape to Rorke's Drift, which is on the river. It's the drift over which the central column has advanced in the first place. It's effectively a supply camp. It's peopled by about 100 fit soldiers and 39 ill soldiers who are in a hospital there. And when they receive word from some of the survivors at Islamwana that the Zulus are likely to be advancing on them, their first instinct is to flee. But one of the heroes of the day, a man called Dalton, suggests that actually fleeing's not a good idea because the Zulus will be able to move faster than they can in their wagons. So why don't they just lager up and try and turn the post into a fortification, which is what they do. And for the course of the next roughly 12 hours, a battle rages in which 3,000 to 4,000 Zulu warriors, the reserve which wasn't in action at Islamwana, attacks this fortified post and ultimately is beaten off, and only 17 European lives are lost, and we don't know exactly, but up to 1,000 Zulus. And what's most scandalous about the Battle of Rorke's Drift is that at least 500 wounded Zulu prisoners of war were butchered after the battle itself.
And Michael Caine rules Christmas forevermore.
But just 1 second before we move on from that Islandwana. This was an army with spears taking on what was then called thought of as the great modern world army with artillery and muskets and so on, and defeating them. And this was a great thing. This was their great battle, and still is in the memory.
Islamwana was a great victory, and it came about because of overconfidence on the part of the British commander, Lord Chelmsford. He felt that with modern breech-loading weapons, he could take on any amount of Zulus with even a force as small as he left at Islamwana. Now, you could argue that if the commander at Islamwana had lagered and fought behind defences, he may well have defended the camp, but those were not the orders that were left to him.
Can you take us, Shula, can you take us from those two battles to the end of the Zulu nation as we've been talking about it now?
To the end of the Zulu nation, not the end of the Zulu war.
No.
Right. Well, the war, of course, doesn't end at Isandlwana. The final battle of the war was Chelmsford's alleged great victory over the Zulu at Ulundi 6 months later. But the end of the battle wasn't the end of the Zulu. What happened as a settlement after the war was that Sir Garnet Wolseley, who'd been sent out to South Africa really because of the British disillusion with the way Chelmsford had run the war, to sort things out, Sir Garnet Wolseley devises a settlement for Zulu which involves dividing the kingdom into 13 different chiefdoms and appointing chiefs who were hostile to the Zulu king. The Zulu king himself was captured at the end of the war and was exiled to the Cape. The result of that settlement, which some refer to as the Kilkenny Cat Settlement, was the eruption of civil war in Zululand as royal family members were put under chiefs who opposed Kitshwaya, and the kingdom fell apart. Kitshwaya returns briefly, that's a disaster, and in some, there's a second battle of Ulundi which kills off essentially the political hierarchy.
The elders there.
The elders. And then that, in a sense, is if you want a moment, for the end of the Zulu kingdom, that is the end of the Zulu kingdom. Kitshwaya dies in 1884 and leaves a young son as the heir.
Finally, we get to come towards the end. Soldier Bow. How come the Zulus became so mythologized in English letters and folklore almost? But
Well, at the end of the Zulu War, Disraeli remarks very drolly, "A remarkable people, the Zulu. They convert our bishops, defeat our generals, and put an end to a great European dynasty." What he meant by converting our bishops, of course, was a reference to Colenso, who becomes the great ally of the Zulu and actually learns from the Zulu and feeds into his great book on the Pentateuch, where he challenges the literal interpretation of the Bible. And the reference to the great European dynasty is the Crown Prince Napoleon, who is killed in battle during the Zulu War. But I think the real thing about the Zulu is that Rider Haggard, actually, who's there, plays a great role in this, is that two kind of complementary stereotypes the Zulu are built up. On the one hand, they're a martial race, they're racially powerful, they're eugenically fit, they're not degenerate. On the other hand, they might make great houseboys, muscular, wearing white linen, and recognizing authority and so forth. So the Zulu perform that kind of function in late 19th century British visions of empire, which condenses all sorts of stereotypes into one.
Would you agree with that finally and briefly, Saul David?
Yes, because the British were great co-opters of so-called former martial races into their armed forces, and actually one of the great surprises about the Zulus is that they never were taken into, although there were discussions, they were never actually taken into the British Army, but there was and still is an admiration for the fighting qualities of the Zulus.
Well, thank you very much, Saul David, Saul Dubois, Shula Marks. Next week, Satire. Thank you for listening.